Sandy had always dreamed of leaving her small town and becoming a famous travel photographer. Every morning, she worked quietly in a tiny coffee shop while secretly editing photos on her old laptop. One rainy afternoon, a mysterious customer forgot a leather notebook on the table beside her. Inside the notebook were beautiful travel sketches and a note that said, "To the person brave enough to follow their dreams." At the back of the notebook was a ticket to Paris hidden between the pages. Sandy stared at it for hours, unable to believe her eyes. That night, instead of sleeping, she packed her camera, her favorite sweater, and a small journal. For the first time in years, she felt something stronger than fear. She felt ready. The next morning, Sandy boarded a plane, unaware that this journey would completely change her life forever. Paris was nothing like Sandy imagined. The streets glowed with golden lights. Musicians played near the river, and every corner looked like a painting. Sandy spent her first day taking photos of small cafes and colorful flowers hanging from balconies. While exploring a quiet bookstore, she accidentally bumped into a young artist named Leo. His sketchbook fell to the ground, revealing drawings of places Sandy had photographed earlier that day. They laughed awkwardly and started talking for hours about art, dreams, and travel. Leo told her he was preparing for a citywide art competition, but had lost inspiration recently. Sandy showed him her photography, and for the first time in months, Leo smiled honestly before leaving. He invited her to explore the city with him the next day. Sandy walked back to her hotel under the glowing Paris lights, wondering why meeting a stranger suddenly felt like the beginning of something important. The next morning, Sandy and Leo wandered through hidden streets far away from the crowded tourist spots. Leo showed her secret gardens, tiny bakeries, and an old rooftop with the most beautiful view in Paris. Sandy photographed everything while Leo sketched quietly beside her. As the sun began to set, they shared warm pastries and talked about their childhood dreams. Sandy admitted she was scared of failing and returning home with nothing. Leo confessed he once stopped drawing for almost a year because he thought nobody cared about his art. Their conversation felt easy, like they had known each other forever. Suddenly, Leo asked Sandy to model for one of his sketches. Embarrassed but laughing, she agreed. Hours later, he handed her the finished drawing. It showed Sandy standing confidently beneath the Paris sky, looking fearless. For the first one rainy evening, Sandy stayed late organizing old storage boxes in the archive room. Most of the papers were dusty and forgotten. Then she found a small blue manuscript hidden beneath a pile of books. The title simply said, "The Girl Who Waited for the Stars." Curious, Sandy opened the first page. The story felt strangely personal. The main character dreamed about escaping an ordinary life, just like Sandy herself. Every chapter seemed to mirror emotions she never told anyone. Hours passed without her noticing. When Noah finally entered the archive room, he looked surprised. "You found that book?" Sandy looked up quickly. "You know it?" Noah nodded slowly. "Eleanor wrote it years ago, but she never published it." "Why not?" For a moment, Noah hesitated. "Because the ending reminds her of someone she lost." Over the next few weeks, Sandy and Noah became close friends. They often stayed after work talking about books, music, and dreams, while the city lights glowed outside the office windows. One night, during a heavy thunderstorm, the power suddenly went out across the building. The entire office fell silent except for the rain hitting the windows. Sandy laughed nervously. "Well, this feels like the beginning of a horror movie." Noah chuckled. "Good thing we're terrible horror characters." Using only phone flashlights, they sat near the window and continued talking for hours. Noah admitted he once wanted to become a writer, but stopped after too many rejections. "You ever feel like life moves too fast for your dreams?" he asked quietly. Sandy looked at the rain outside. All the time, but for the first time, she no longer felt alone in that fear. One afternoon, Eleanor gathered everyone into the meeting room with exciting news. A famous international writing competition was opening submissions, and the winner would receive a publishing contract, plus a trip to London. "You should enter," Noah immediately told Sandy. She laughed. "Absolutely not." But Noah refused to give up. Every day he encouraged her to write again, reminding her how much emotion existed inside her stories. Finally, after weeks of hesitation, Sandy began working on a short novel inspired by her own life. Late nights became normal. Coffee cups covered her apartment desk, while unfinished pages filled the floor. Some nights she wanted to quit, but then she remembered Eleanor's words. That's how every dream begins. Little by little, Sandy realized she was no longer writing to impress people. She was writing because it made her feel alive. The night before the competition deadline, Sandy felt completely exhausted. She was convinced her story wasn't good enough. Noah took her to the rooftop of the publishing building to clear her mind. The city sparkled below them like thousands of tiny stars. You know, Noah said softly, most people spend their whole lives hiding from the things they love. Sandy stayed quiet. But you didn't hide, he continued. That already makes you braver than you think. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Cold wind moved through Sandy's hair as she stared at the glowing skyline. What if nothing changes after this? She asked quietly. Noah smiled gently. Then we keep trying. Before leaving, Sandy made a small promise to herself under the city lights. No matter what happened next, she would never abandon her dreams again. A month later, Sandy stood inside an airport for the very first time in her life. Her story had officially won second place in the competition, earning her a trip to London alongside several young writers from around the world. As the airplane lifted into the clouds, Sandy stared out the window in disbelief. Everything felt unreal. London was beautiful rainy streets, glowing bookstores, musicians performing underground, and endless little cafes filled with people writing stories. One evening, Sandy sat near the River Thames holding her notebook while soft lights reflected across the water. Noah had texted her earlier. Don't forget to enjoy the moment, superstar. She smiled at the message. For years, Sandy believed happiness only existed. 1 year later, Sandy stood nervously inside a crowded bookstore holding her very first published novel. People filled the room waiting for her book signing. It still felt impossible. The girl who once doubted every dream was now inspiring readers from different countries with her own story. As Sandy signed books, she noticed a shy teenage girl standing quietly near the back of the line, holding a notebook tightly against her chest. When it was finally her turn, the girl spoke softly. I want to become a writer too, but I'm scared. Sandy smiled gently because she understood that feeling perfectly. She opened the girl's notebook and wrote, Dreams grow slowly. Don't give up before they bloom. The girl's eyes filled with Sandy walked outside beneath the glowing city lights, feeling grateful for every difficult moment that brought her there.